Hey everyone, how's it going? So today in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to remove the instrument cluster in an '04 to '08 Pontiac Grand Prix. This applies to all trim levels, whether you have the GXP cluster or just the base model cluster, it doesn't matter. It's the same process. So we're going to go ahead and get started right now. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to pull back the accessory trim piece, which is this large piece here. We just need to pull it back. We don't need to remove it completely. So the way you do that, the best way to do that is to reach up underneath here with your fingers and pull back, okay? Now, put your finger or your thumb over the ignition key and pull out even more. Just grab underneath here and pull out. That'll release the ignition key cover. And then from there, you can just pull out the rest of the way, bring it about all the way around, and then we can set this aside. The reason I'm doing this to set it aside is just to get it out of the way and make a little bit more room. So there you can see it's set aside, and now we can turn our attention to the understeering wheel trim. Okay, so in order to get this large piece off, requires a couple of things. First of all, we're going to have to remove this side panel here. It's fairly easy to get off. Just get your fingers, if you have fingers, or you could use a screwdriver if you wanted to, but get your fingers underneath here and it should detach rather easily. And there we go. So the side piece has been removed rather easily, and that gives us access to this one screw right here. So we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to the OBD CAN bus port. Alright, so underneath the steering column is the OBD CAN bus port, or diagnostic interface port. And in order to release this, right at this point here, you can see there's a little tab. Basically, you just take a flat blade screwdriver that's small enough to reach into the tab. You push the tab inward, and then you pull down on the OBD connector, and it'll just fall and release on its own. Alright, so the OBD connector is released, and now we can turn our attention to the three Phillips head screws that are holding the piece in place. There's one right there. There's one right here just above the parking brake pedal. And then the last one, which I showed you before, is right here on this side. So we're going to go ahead and remove those now. Okay, so the three screws have been removed. And the way to get this out is actually fairly simple. You just grab it basically from anywhere you can. I'm going to grab it from the side here first, and you just pull towards you. And you'll hear it release. And you go to the other side and you do the same thing. You just grab it and then you pull it towards you. Grab it up here, just like that. Okay, so if you have the digital dual zone climate controls, you'll notice that you have a temperature sensor that's right here. You can just leave it exactly where it's at. You don't have to bother it. So now we can go ahead and pull the instrument cluster trim out. Alright, so for this step, getting this actual trim piece off, this is a instrument cluster trim housing, however you want to call it. It's really easy to get off. There's basically, you just pull on it and you pull it towards you. So what I like to do is I like to start at this end down here where you can see it's open, and just pull back towards you. See if I can do this with one hand. There we go. Okay, so just pull it back towards you, and then just go around the outside and do the same thing. You can optionally go back to this side, pull it towards you, and then just take your fingers, bring them around, pull the rest of it out. Try to be as gentle as possible. You don't want to scratch your instrument cluster. And now you can see the entire unit is free from the dash. So the next step is you'll see behind here, you'll see your interior dome switch, and what you need to make sure is that you disconnect this wire harness, which is right here. It's kind of hard to see, but on the other side back here, which I can't get on the camera, is a release pin, and you just basically push down on it and then you release the switch. So what I've done here is I've tilted the whole thing so that it's down here so that you can see what I'm talking about here. There is a little release retainer. I'm trying to do this with one hand. Release retainer right here. You don't have to flip this in order to get to it. You just reach in and you basically just grab it right here, use your thumb, push in on it, and that'll release the harness, just like that. Okay, So now that this is away, we can go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay, so before I go any further, I want to be clear about something. You do not want your key in the ignition. And I say that again, you do not want your key in the ignition. Trust me when I say this, okay? So make sure your key is not in the ignition. You don't need to disconnect your battery or anything. Just make sure your key is not in your ignition. Alright, so now that I've said that 4 times, there's one final step to getting this released. Well, actually 2, but we'll just go on to the main step. There's 4 Phillips head screws. There's one there. There's one down here, which you probably can't see on camera. It's right there. There's another one on the opposite side down here. And then there's another one right here, okay? So we'll just remove those 4 screws and then we'll be able to pull the cluster away. I've got 3 out of the 4 screws out, and you may need to tilt your steering wheel in any direction in order to actually be able to reach in and grab these, because your turn signal lever is going to be in the way, your wiper lever is going to be in the way, so just tilt the steering wheel whichever way you need to in order to get this get access to the screws. So with all 4 screws out, I'm going to go ahead and tilt my steering wheel down a little bit. And this whole thing just kind of slides right out. I mean, it's not held in or snapped in by anything. Just kind of slides right out. So just grab it real carefully. So you don't want to scratch this up unless you're replacing yours. You don't want to scratch it up. So do your best to go around and just kind of pull it out. And it should come out fairly easy. Now there's one thing left. There is a wire harness. Let's see if I can flip this around. There's a wire harness right there that needs to be disconnected. And there's another one of those tabs. It's facing towards you. You just basically take your thumb, you push in on the tab, and you should be able to release it. Just like that, okay? Real easy to do. So now the instrument cluster is free from the dash. Again, be real careful with this thing, right? I mean, it's not exactly bulletproof, so this is a perfect time to clean yours if you need to. Some people like to change the color of their instrument cluster, replace the LEDs that are on the inside with different colors. This is actually a white lettering, so there is no red film on the inside. They actually use red LEDs to illuminate this. And there's a lot of things that you can do with it. Just be as gentle as possible with it. One of the common things people do is they replace their standard 140 mile per hour instrument cluster with the GXP cluster, which is real easy to do. Just make sure you get the same year. That's real important. So if you have an 05, make sure you get an 05. If you have an 08, make sure you get an 08. So that'll ensure compatibility. And yeah, so this is what it looks like. There's plenty of pictures on the internet. Sorry, I'm trying to do this with the steering wheel in my way. So I get the steering wheel out of the way a little bit. So yeah, pretty simple, pretty basic. If you needed to get on the inside of this thing, which I'm not going to open up right now, there's tabs right here. There's another tab right there. There's tabs all over the place that will get this. There's no screws that are actually holding this together, just tabs. So just push the tabs in and you should be able to separate it. But again, I'm not going to be separating mine. I'm just going to be cleaning it up and putting it back in. So, all right. That's how you get it out. So let's go ahead and go to the reinstall. All right, so I have the instrument cluster all cleaned up. And I did bring my microfiber cloth. The best thing I recommend to clean this with so you don't scratch it. Microfiber cloth, and then I used a computer monitor cleaner. It's just basically a small spray bottle, and I just sprayed it on the cloth and then wiped it down. So because I'm no doubt going to get some fingerprints and whatever else on this while I'm reinstalling it, I brought the cloth out to do a quick wipe down when I've got it back in. So this is what it looks like behind the cluster, and you know, there's nothing really to say. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tilt our steering wheel back down, and tilt it down to about right there. And we're going to go ahead and slide the cluster. I'm going to do this with 2 hands because I really don't feel like ruining this. But basically just take the cluster, lift it up, and then slide it back into the slot. And these little tabs right here will line it up for you. So don't think that you've got to, you know, get it just perfect. It's going to line it up for you. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. Before you seat this thing, you got to make sure that you plug the instrument cluster back in. And you just grab the cable. Again, I'm going to have to do this with 2 hands. Just grab the cable, pull the cluster forward a little bit, plug it in, and then you can seat the cluster back into the slot. So I have the cluster plugged back in, and you may notice that the needles move slightly, or you may hear a sound in the cluster when you first plug it in. That's normal, so don't think there's anything wrong with it. So now with that done, and you can go ahead and push it back into place. Alright, so now that it's pushed back into place, you can see it's lined up. I'm going to go ahead and take my microfiber cloth, and I'm going to go ahead and wipe down any fingerprints that I happen to leave behind or whatever, and clean it up real good. Alright, so we're all set now. Need to get the 4 screws and reinstall them. Right, so all 4 screws are back in place, and now we can go ahead and turn our attention to the instrument cluster trim, which is right here. First thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to plug in your interior dome switch, and then you can go ahead and slide the cluster trim right over the top. So this should give you a better view of what I'm doing. I've basically set the plastic trim over the top, and then I'm going to lift back on this portion here and then basically just plug it in. Okay, so one last thing before we go ahead and reinstall this. You want to make sure you tuck the wire in as much as possible. There's a little hole there where the wire comes out. Tuck as much of that wire down there as you can, because what you don't want is for it to get caught in between the cluster and the harness, and then this thing isn't going to snap in place all the way. Alright, so just make sure everything's lined up, and you basically just go around the outside and you push it in. I mean, it's really that simple. Just take the whole thing, push it in, go all the way around, and that's it. So this is back in place, and now we can turn our attention to the trim that's underneath the steering wheel. Okay, so if you need to, if you have the dual zone climate controls, go ahead and lock your interior temperature sensor back in place. It just snaps back in place, and then you can go ahead and lift the piece up, line it up with the little grooves that are right here. Just line it up with the grooves, and then it should just pop right back into place. Just line everything up the best you can, and go to this side here. Alright, so it may take some wiggling around, but you should be able to get it. So now we're locked into place, and we go ahead and get the 3 screws back in. Alright, so now we go ahead and plug in our diagnostic port, just really easily. Just make sure the 2 tabs are on the outside like that, and then just push it up, and it locks into place rather easily. So the driver's side trim panel here, the best way to do this is to slide it in at an angle like that, and then push it inward. And it should lock right into place. Alright, so that step is done. Last on the list is to get our dash trim panel back in place. It's really easy to do. Just line it up and then just push it back into place. It snaps right into place with no problems whatsoever. There we are. And the final step, getting our ignition key trim back on. Just line it up, and you should be able to just push it right in. Okay, so that's it. That job took all of about, I don't know, maybe 5-7 minutes to get the instrument cluster out and back in. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. As I said before, a common mod is to replace your standard baseline instrument cluster with the 160, the GXP cluster. It's really easy to do. Just try to get the same year, because some of the interfaces like CAN bus, OBD don't match up. So if you have any questions at all, definitely let me know. Take care, guys.